The stale air, thick with the metallic tang of old blood and the cloying sweetness of decay, was a constant reminder. They were buried alive. Ilara pressed her ear to the cold, damp concrete wall of their tiny alcove, a forgotten storage closet off a minor service tunnel. Her breath hitched, not from fear of the sounds beyond, the distant, wet coughs and dragging shuffles of the changed, but for the rasping breaths beside her. Leo. His small chest stuttered with each inhale, a tiny, desperate bellows failing in its task. The last puff from his inhaler had been hours ago, a pathetic hiss that offered little more than false hope. "It's okay, Leo," she whispered, her voice a raw scrape in the oppressive silence. "Big sister's here. I'll get you more medicine." He didn't answer, just a weak squeeze of her hand, his skin clammy and cold. How long had it been since they'd seen the sun? Months, an eternity swallowed by the earth when the world above had fractured, screamed, and then fallen silent, choked by the sickness that turned vibrant life into mindless, hungry flesh. The metro had been their only refuge, a desperate gamble that had become a subterranean tomb. Ilara checked the crude weapon she'd fashioned, a sharpened length of rebar, its tip fire-hardened. It wasn't much against the things that roamed the tunnels, but it was something. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drummer counting down an unknown, terrifying clock. "I have to go. Now." "Stay quiet, little mouse," she murmured, tucking the threadbare blanket tighter around Leo. His eyes, too large in his gaunt face, were clouded with fever and fear. "Don't make a sound. Don't open the door for anyone but me. Understand?" A faint nod. That would have to be enough. She couldn't dwell on the image of him alone, vulnerable. The thought was a physical ache, a claw tightening around her lungs. Focus. The pharmacy kiosk. Concourse C, near the old ticket barriers. It was a long shot. Most accessible places had been stripped bare months ago, first by the desperate, then by the organized, like Commander Valerius's iron-fisted scavengers. But there was always a chance. A forgotten corner, a hidden compartment. Hope, a fragile, stubborn weed, pushed through the cracks of her despair. She slid the heavy metal door of their alcove open a mere sliver, peering into the gloom of the service tunnel. The emergency lights had failed long ago. Her only illumination came from a sputtering, oil-soaked rag torch she'd painstakingly crafted, its light casting dancing, monstrous shadows that turned familiar debris into lurking horrors. The air here was worse, heavy with the scent of mildew and something else, something primal and rotten that spoke of the changed. Every drip of water from the arched ceiling, every skitter of a rat in the darkness, sent a jolt of adrenaline through her. She forced herself forward, one cautious step after another, the rebar held ready. The silence of the metro was a deceptive beast. It could be shattered in an instant by a guttural moan, a frantic scramble of claws on concrete. She'd seen what the change did. The memory, sharp and visceral, threatened to paralyze her. Mrs. Henderson from apartment 3B, her kind eyes milky and vacant, fingers gnarled into claws, lunging for Ilara with a sound that was no longer human. Ilara had been faster then, dragging Leo away from the initial chaos in the station above, down into the suffocating dark. "Don't think about it. Keep moving." The main tunnel leading to Concourse C was wider, littered with the detritus of a panicked evacuation. Overturned luggage carts, scattered clothes, a child's single, mud-caked shoe. Each item whispered a story of loss, of lives abruptly and brutally ended. Ilara kept to the shadows, her senses straining. A faint dragging sound from a side passage made her freeze, heart leaping into her throat. She flattened herself against a grimy tiled wall, extinguishing her torch, plunging herself into absolute blackness. The dragging grew louder, accompanied by a series of wet, rasping gurgles. It passed the mouth of her passage. She waited, counting her heartbeats, until the sounds receded. Only then did she dare to relight her torch, her hand shaking so violently it took 3 attempts. The kiosk was just ahead, a dim outline in the gloom. Its shutters were mangled, ripped half open. A dark stain, unmistakably blood, smeared the counter. Her stomach clenched. Too late. Someone got here first. Still, she had to check. She squeezed through the gap, the rebar held defensively. The small space was a disaster. Shelves swept clean, drawers pulled out and emptied, broken glass crunching under her worn boots. Despair, cold and heavy, settled over her. There was nothing. Not a single blister pack, not one forgotten bottle. Then, a flicker of movement in the deepest shadow behind the counter. Ilara's breath caught. Not a rat. Larger. A low moan, thick with phlegm and hunger, echoed in the confined space. A pair of luminous, pale eyes fixed on her. The changed. Trapped with her. The rebar suddenly felt like a toothpick. Leo's wheezing gasps echoed in her mind. A death knell. Number not like this. The air in the fortified Northwood Station, rechristened Sanctuary by its self-appointed leader, Commander Valerius, was marginally better than the outer tunnels, filtered through sputtering, jury-rigged systems. But it carried its own distinct miasma, fear, subservience, and the faint, ever-present scent of antiseptic attempting to mask something far more ingrained. Anna stood at her post near the main access checkpoint, a heavy pulse rifle slung over her shoulder. It was more weight than she was used to, but Valerius insisted his sentries project an image of unshakable strength. She watched Rex, Valerius's taciturn second-in-command, inspect the newly erected barricade convoy, more scrap metal, more concertina wire. His face, all sharp angles and shadowed eyes, betrayed nothing. Valerius himself was addressing a gathering of his captains in the station master's office, its grime, streaked windows overlooking the gloomy platform where Sanctuary's denizens huddled. His voice, amplified by a crackling loudspeaker, boomed across the relative quiet. "Order," Valerius declared, his tone leaving no room for debate. "Order is the bedrock upon which survival is built. Without it, we are no better than the mindless husks scratching at our gates. Every rule, every restriction, every hardship is a brick in the wall that separates us from chaos, from the sickness that devours." Anna shivered, though the station was stuffy. His words were like cold iron. A commotion near the water rationing point drew her attention. 2 guards were dragging a young man, no older than herself, towards the disciplinary platform. His crime? Trying to sneak an extra half-liter of water. Pathetic, desperate. Valerius's voice cut through the murmurs of the crowd. An example must be made. Those who jeopardize the community jeopardize themselves. There are no small infractions in a world teetering on oblivion. The sentence was swift, brutal. 10 lashes, publicly administered. The dull thud of the leather on flesh, the young man's choked cries, echoed in the cavernous space. Anna looked away, her stomach churning. Rex, who had paused his inspection to watch, merely nodded, his expression unreadable. Was that approval, or just grim acceptance? He knew the rules. Rex said later, his voice low as he passed Anna's post. "Valerius believes weakness is a contagion. Stamp it out before it spreads." Anna swallowed. But it was just water. Rex's gaze lingered on her for a moment, a flicker of something, pity, warning. In their depths. In this world, Anna, water is life, and life is Valerius's currency to control. He didn't elaborate, just moved on, leaving her with a nod of disquiet. Later, Valerius emerged, his presence silencing the station. He surveyed his domain, his eyes, cold and gray as the concrete, missing nothing. He paused before Anna. "Sentry, report." "All quiet, Commander," she managed, her voice steadier than she felt. "The perimeter is secure." Valerius nodded slowly. "Good, but security is not static. It must be asserted. The changed are a constant threat, but so too are the scavengers, the unaffiliated. They drain resources, they spread disorder. They are a cancer." He gestured towards the darkened mouth of a tunnel leading east. "A cleansing patrol will depart at 0600. You will be part of it, Sentry. Lieutenant Graves will be in command. Your objective: neutralize any changed encountered, intercept and process any unauthorized personnel, confiscate all viable goods, process." The word hung in the air, chillingly sterile. Anna had heard stories about what processing entailed for those caught outside Valerius's rule. Few returned. "Yes, Commander," she said, the words tasting like ash. Her first patrol, her first true test. He gave her a thin, predatory smile. "Show me you understand the necessity of our methods, Sentry. Show me you have the strength to preserve Sanctuary." His gaze swept over her, then to the dark tunnel. "The world outside these walls is unforgiving. We must be more so." As he walked away, Rex fell into step beside him. Anna overheard Valerius murmur, "The girl looks soft. Ensure Graves keeps her in line, or ensures she learns." The implication was clear. Fail, and she wouldn't just be disciplined, she would be re-educated, or worse. Dread, cold and sharp, pierced through Anna. The cleansing patrol. It sounded less like a mission of protection and more like a death squad, and she was part of it. The Changed lunged, its moan a guttural roar that vibrated through Ilara's bones. She stumbled back, instinctively ramming the sharpened rebar forward. It struck something soft, yielding, and a rancid, coppery smell filled the air. The creature shrieked, a horrifying, inhuman sound, and thrashed, its clawed hands flailing wildly. Ilara scrambled away, heart pounding. The image of its milky, hate-filled eyes burned into her mind. It wasn't dead, just momentarily impeded. She had to get out. The kiosk was a death trap. She burst back into the concourse, gasping for air, her torch skittering across the grimy floor before extinguishing. Darkness, absolute, suffocating darkness. Panic clawed at her throat. Leo. Leo needs me. That thought, a desperate mantra, cut through the terror. She fumbled for her tinderbox, her fingers slick with sweat. Or was it the creature's blood? A distant clatter echoed down the main tunnel. Footsteps, multiple sets, heavy, booted. Not the dragging shuffle of the Changed. A patrol, Valerius's enforcers. She'd heard stories of their brutality, their cold efficiency, caught between the devil and the deep blue sea. Her torch finally caught, casting a weak, flickering light. The Changed was pulling itself out of the kiosk, one arm hanging at an unnatural angle, its movements jerky but relentless. It saw her. It was coming. No time to think. Ilara spun and fled, deeper into the labyrinthine network of tunnels, away from Concourse C, away from the approaching patrol. Her lungs burned, her side screaming from a fresh scrape where she'd slammed against a support pillar. She risked a glance back. The Changed was gaining, its silhouette a grotesque parody of a human form against the faint, distant glow of what must be the patrol's lights. She ducked into a narrower maintenance tunnel, the ceiling so low she had to stoop. Pipes snaked along the walls, slick with condensation, and the air was thick with the smell of rust and something else, something acrid, chemical. She remembered this section from a scavenge months ago, a dead end, but with a small ventilation shaft, too tight for an adult, but, maybe, it was her only chance. The sounds of the Changed were closer now, its guttural breathing a horrifying counterpoint to her own ragged gasps. Then, another sound, overlaying it, harsh voices, barked commands, the patrol. They were in the main tunnel, parallel to her. If they heard the Changed, if they heard her. She reached the end of the passage. A sheer wall, but there, near the ceiling, was the ventilation grate. Rusted, but possibly removable. She jammed the rebar into a crack in the wall, using it as a makeshift step, and scrabbled at the grate. It was stiff, unyielding. Tears of frustration and terror pricked her eyes. Come on, come on. The Changed was at the entrance of the narrow tunnel now, its bulk momentarily blocking the passage. It squeezed through, scraping against the pipes, moaning in frustration and hunger. Behind it, she could hear the patrol shouting. Fan out, check these service tunnels, something's stirring them up. A beam of light sliced into the passage, momentarily blinding her. With a final desperate wrench, fueled by adrenaline, the grate tore free with a screech of tortured metal. Ilara didn't hesitate. She threw herself at the opening, wriggling, scraping her skin raw against the jagged edges. It was impossibly tight. For a horrifying moment, she thought she was stuck. The Changed was almost upon her, its fetid breath washing over her legs. She kicked out blindly, connecting with its face. It recoiled with a snarl, giving her the precious second she needed. With a final, agonizing heave, she pulled herself through, tumbling into the narrow, dusty confines of the shaft beyond, just as a volley of shots erupted from the patrol's rifles, aimed into the tunnel she'd just vacated. The Changed shrieked, a sound cut short. Ilara lay there, gasping, trembling, covered in dust and grime, the echoes of gunfire ringing in her ears. Safe, for now. But the patrol was close, too close. And Leo was still waiting, his life fading with every rasping breath. The beam of Lieutenant Graves's high-powered flashlight cut through the oppressive gloom of the service tunnel, illuminating Anna's pale, tense face. "Sentry Miller, you saw anything?" Graves was a mountain of a man, his face a roadmap of old scars, his eyes like chips of ice. He radiated a brutal efficiency that chilled Anna to the bone. "No, Lieutenant," she stammered. Just the changed. It came out of that kiosk." She gestured vaguely towards the mangled pharmacy. "We dealt with it," Graves grunted, nudging the twitching corpse of the creature with his boot. "But something spooked it. Keep sharp. Valerius wants this sector swept clean." The patrol moved with practiced, grim precision, their boots crunching on debris, flashlight beams stabbing into every shadow. They were a dozen strong, armed with pulse rifles and stun batons, their faces hard, impassive. Anna trailed at the rear, her own rifle feeling alien and heavy. Her heart hammered against her ribs, not from fear of the changed, but from the chilling purpose of the men around her. This wasn't about safety, it was about dominion. They rounded a bend and came upon a makeshift camp, a few smoldering embers of a fire, a tattered blanket, a discarded empty can. Squatters. Graves spat, his lip curling. "Spread out, find them." The search was short. 2 figures, a man and a woman, gaunt and terrified, were dragged from a hidden alcove behind a rusted-out maintenance panel. They clutched a meager bag of scavenged supplies, a few tins of food, a handful of batteries. "Unauthorized personnel," Graves announced, his voice flat. "And in possession of restricted goods." The woman began to weep, pleading, "Please, we're just trying to survive." "We have nothing." The man stood protectively in front of her, his eyes darting around, looking for an escape that wasn't there. "Valerius's law is clear," Graves stated, unmoved. "All resources within these designated sectors belong to Sanctuary. Scavenging without authorization is theft, and theft carries a penalty." Anna watched in horror as 2 guards advanced on the couple. The man tried to resist, a desperate, futile gesture. He was clubbed down with a stun baton, his body convulsing on the filthy ground. The woman screamed, "No, please." Graves gestured to Anna. "Sentry Miller, secure the female, and the contraband." Anna froze. Her mind screamed, "No, this is wrong." But the lieutenant's cold gaze was on her, and the other guards were watching, their expressions ranging from indifference to cruel anticipation. She remembered Valerius's words, "Show me you have the strength." Failure was not an option. Her hand, slick with sweat, tightened on her rifle. She took a hesitant step forward. Suddenly, a deafening chorus of moans and shrieks erupted from further down the tunnel. The gunfire earlier had drawn more than just the patrol's attention. A horde of changed, their eyes glowing with feral hunger, poured around a distant bend, their numbers overwhelming. "Changed, contact front," a guard yelled. Graves swore. "Form a line, open fire." The disciplined formation of the patrol momentarily broke as they turned to face the new, more immediate threat. Pulse rifle fire tore through the air, the high-energy blasts ripping through the decaying flesh of the foremost creatures, but more kept coming, a tide of grotesque bodies. Anna found herself swept up in the sudden chaos, firing almost by instinct, the recoil jarring her shoulder. The captured woman, forgotten in the melee, saw her chance. She scrambled to her feet and bolted towards a dark side passage. "The female is escaping," one guard yelled, turning his weapon. "No." Anna cried out, a reflexive, unthinking protest, but it was too late. A burst of pulse fire caught the woman in the back. She crumpled without a sound. The sight, stark and brutal, snapped something within Anna. The disciplined soldier persona shattered, replaced by a raw, visceral horror. She saw not a scavenger, but a desperate human being, murdered for trying to live. The changed were still advancing, their numbers seemingly endless. One of them, a bloated horror with half its face missing, lunged at a guard near Anna, dragging him down screaming. Graves was bellowing orders, trying to maintain control, but panic was setting in. "Fall back. Sector Gamma -7. Regroup at the C-Line junction." Amidst the carnage and chaos, Anna saw the man who had been clubbed. He was struggling to rise, his eyes fixed on the spot where the woman had fallen. He was going to be overrun. Without thinking, without weighing the consequences, Anna broke ranks. She grabbed the man's arm, hauling him to his feet. "Come on, this way," she yelled, pulling him towards a narrow, debris-choked conduit she'd noticed earlier, one too small for the patrol to easily follow, and hopefully overlooked by the surging changed. It was an insane risk. If Graves saw her, but she couldn't leave him to die. Not after what she'd just witnessed. As they scrambled into the conduit, a pulse blast scorched the wall where they'd been standing. Graves had seen. Ilara pressed herself deeper into the cramped ventilation shaft, dust motes dancing in the slivers of light that penetrated from unseen grates. The sounds of the firefight, the distinct sharp cracks of pulse rifles and the inhuman shrieks of the changed, were terrifyingly close, echoing through the metal ductwork. She was trapped, a rat in a maze, with predators on all sides. Exhaustion gnawed at her, her muscles screaming in protest, her earlier injuries throbbing. But the thought of Leo, alone and vulnerable, his breathing growing weaker, spurred her on. She had to find a way out, a way back to him. She crawled forward, inch by agonizing inch, the rough metal scraping her raw. The shaft twisted, turned, and then, blessedly, opened into a slightly larger junction box, offering enough room to sit up and catch her breath. It was here, huddled in the relative quiet, the distant sounds of conflict, a dull roar, that she heard a different sound, closer. A metallic clang, then a low curse, followed by the scrape of something heavy being moved. Someone was nearby, not changed, not part of the patrol. She held her breath, straining her ears. The sounds came from below, from what seemed to be an old maintenance room, judging by the faint smell of oil and ozone. Carefully, Ilara located a loose panel in the floor of the junction box. Prying it open a fraction, she peered down. The room was small, cluttered with defunct machinery and rusting tools. A single battery-powered lantern cast a pool of unsteady light, revealing a figure methodically searching through a pile of discarded equipment. He was tall, wiry, dressed in dark, functional clothing similar to Valerius's men, but without the insignia. As he turned, his face came into the light. Ilara's heart lurched. Rex. Valerius's second-in-command. What was he doing here, alone, away from the patrol and the fighting? Her immediate instinct was to flee, to pull back and find another route. Rex was dangerous, an extension of Valerius's tyranny, but she was trapped, and he was between her and any potential exit from this section of the shafts. Then, he coughed, a dry, hacking sound, and slumped against a workbench, his head in his hands. He looked weary. Different from the impassive, controlled figure she'd glimpsed in Sanctuary's periphery. Before she could decide what to do, a section of the rusted ducting above her, weakened by her passage, gave way with a groan and a shower of rust. She lost her balance, tumbling through the opening, landing hard on the concrete floor of the room with a cry of pain. Rex whirled around, a heavy wrench instantly in his hand, his eyes narrowed, alert. He saw her, sprawled on the floor, disheveled, bleeding from a fresh cut on her forehead. The rebar lay a few feet away. For a long moment, they just stared at each other, the silence thick with tension. Ilara's mind raced. He would kill her, or take her to Valerius. This was it. Who are you? Rex's voice was low, rougher than she remembered. What are you doing here? Ilara pushed herself up, wincing. Looking for a way out, she said, her voice hoarse. Same as you, I imagine. A gamble. But his presence here, alone, suggested he wasn't on official business. Rex didn't lower the wrench. You were with the scavengers Graves patrol engaged? No, Ilara said quickly. I was alone, running from the changed. And them. She met his gaze, trying to project a desperation she didn't have to feign. My brother, he's sick. He needs medicine. An inhaler. Rex's expression remained unreadable, but the tension in his stance eased slightly. He lowered the wrench a fraction. An inhaler? Down here? You're optimistic. I have to be. Ilara said, her voice cracking. He's all I have. Rex studied her for another long moment, his gaze intense. Then, he sighed, a sound of profound weariness, and finally lowered the wrench completely. There are no inhalers in this sector. Valerius's people cleared it out weeks ago. Despair hit Ilara with renewed force. Then, where? Rex turned away, running a hand through his already disheveled hair. There's a medical storage, deep in the old Red Line tunnels. Valerius keeps it under heavy guard, calls it his contingency supply. He paused. It's also rumored to be where he stashes anything valuable, he finds. He looked back at her, a strange, calculating light in his eyes. Getting in there is suicide. I don't care, Ilara said, her voice fierce. If there's a chance. Rex leaned against the workbench. He pulled out a small, battered water flask and a clean strip of cloth from his pack. He tossed them to her. Clean yourself up. You're bleeding all over the place. Ilara stared at him, astonished by the unexpected gesture. Why are you helping me? Rex shrugged, a cynical twist to his lips. Maybe I'm tired of Valerius's brand of order. Maybe I have my own reasons for wanting to see his private stash. Or maybe, he added, his gaze uncomfortably direct, I just don't like seeing kids die if it can be avoided. He pushed himself off the bench. The red line is a long way from here, and crawling with changed, not to mention Valerius's patrols. If you're serious, you'll need a better plan than just hope. He paused at the door of the maintenance room. Meet me at the old water reclamation plant, West Conduit, 2 hours after the all-clear siren, if it ever sounds. If you're not there, I'll assume you came to your senses. Or didn't make it. He didn't wait for an answer, just slipped out into the darkness, leaving Ilara alone with a pounding heart, a throbbing head, and a dangerous, terrifying sliver of hope. The debriefing room was cold, sterile, smelling faintly of disinfectant and fear. Anna stood at rigid attention, her uniform stained with grime and something she prayed wasn't blood, facing Commander Valerius. Lieutenant Graves stood beside her, his face a thundercloud. Rex was present too, leaning against the far wall, his expression, as usual, unreadable, though Anna thought she detected a flicker of interest when Graves recounted her actions. And then Sentry Miller, in direct contravention of my orders and established protocol, aided the male unauthorized personnel to escape. Graves finished, his voice tight with controlled fury. She jeopardized the patrol and directly disobeyed a superior officer. Valerius's gray eyes, cold as death, bored into Anna. She could feel sweat trickling down her back. She had expected to be dragged here, not to walk in, albeit under Graves' heavy-handed escort. The man she'd helped, she'd managed to shove him into a branching sewer pipe, telling him to keep going until he found a way up or out, before Graves's men could corner them both. She had then feigned being cut off by a surge of changed, rejoining a different part of the patrol later, hoping her actions had gone unnoticed in the larger chaos. Clearly, she'd been wrong. Sentry Miller, Valerius said, his voice deceptively calm. Explain yourself. Anna swallowed, her throat dry. Telling the truth, that she couldn't stand by and watch another innocent die, would be suicide. Lying felt almost as dangerous. Commander, she began, her voice trembling slightly. In the confusion, with the changed attacking, I believe the prisoner was attempting to assist me against an immediate threat. My actions were a tactical misjudgment in the heat of the moment. It was a weak excuse, and she knew it. Graves snorted derisively. A misjudgment? She actively pulled him from our grasp, sir. Valerius raised a hand, silencing Graves. He paced slowly in front of Anna, his footsteps echoing in the stark room. Misjudgment, he mused. Or misplaced sentimentality. Sentimentality, Sentry, is a disease. It weakens the resolve. It corrupts the will to survive. In Sanctuary, we excise disease, do we not? His eyes flicked to Rex, who gave a minute, almost imperceptible nod. We do, Commander, Rex affirmed, his voice neutral. Valerius stopped in front of Anna again. You are young, Sentry. Perhaps you have not yet fully grasped the stakes. The sickness outside these walls is not just of the flesh, it is of the mind, of the spirit. It is the chaos that comes when order breaks down. Every rule, every act of discipline, is a bulwark against that chaos. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. That man you misjudged as an ally? He was a leech, a drain on our finite resources. The woman with him? The same. They chose to live outside the system, to reject the protection and provision of Sanctuary. Their fate was their own choosing. Anna's insides twisted. He spoke with such conviction, such unwavering belief in his own brutal righteousness. Was this what it took to survive? To become so hard, so unyielding, that compassion itself became a liability? She thought of the children in Sanctuary, their faces pale and pinched, their eyes too old. She thought of the hushed whispers of disappearances, of those who questioned Valerius and were never seen again. I understand, Commander, she said, forcing the words out. It will not happen again. Valerius studied her for a long, unnerving moment. See that it doesn't, he said finally. "Lieutenant Graves believes you are a liability. Perhaps even a sympathizer." He paused, letting the accusation hang in the air. "However," he continued, a slight shift in his tone, "Rex has suggested your unorthodox initiative might be channeled. He has a special assignment. Something requiring a delicate touch and perhaps a degree of expendability." Anna's blood ran cold. A special assignment, vouched for by Rex? That sounded even more dangerous than facing Valerius's direct wrath. Rex pushed himself off the wall. "There's a rumor of a supply cache in the Red Line tunnels, unconfirmed, potentially hazardous. I need a small, deniable team to investigate." Miller showed resourcefulness under pressure. His gaze met Anna's, and for an instant she saw something complex there, a challenge, a warning, perhaps even a hidden opportunity. "She can go," Valerius said, waving a dismissive hand. "If she succeeds, she may yet prove her loyalty. If she fails—" He left the sentence unfinished, the implication clear. "Consider this your final chance, Sentry Miller. Do not disappoint me again." As she was dismissed, her legs feeling like lead, Anna couldn't shake the feeling that she had just stepped from one trap into another, far more intricate and perilous. And as she passed Rex in the corridor, he murmured, so low only she could hear, "The Red Line, interesting place, full of ghosts and secrets." The way he said it sent a fresh shiver of apprehension down her spine. He knew something, or he was testing her. Ilara made it back to the alcove, her body screaming with exhaustion, her mind a turmoil of fear and fragile hope. Leo was weaker, his breathing shallower, a faint wheezing sound the only indication he was still alive. His skin was hot to the touch. Leo, can you hear me?" she whispered, gently shaking his shoulder. His eyelids fluttered open, dull and unfocused. "Ella, Ra," he rasped, his voice barely audible. "Thirsty." She fumbled for the water flask Rex had given her, guiding the spout to Leo's cracked lips. He managed a few sips, then coughed, a painful, racking sound. "The medicine, did you?" Ilara's heart ached. "Not yet, little mouse, but I know where to find it. I met someone. He's going to help." Leo's eyes widened slightly. "Who?" "His name is Rex," she said, omitting his connection to Valerius. No need to frighten Leo more than necessary. He knows a place. It's dangerous, but it's our only chance. The all-clear siren, a mournful, wailing sound that echoed through the metro, finally cut through the oppressive silence. It signaled the end of the immediate crisis, the retreat of the patrol, the temporary abatement of the major changed activity they'd stirred up. 2 hours. Rex had said 2 hours. Ilara looked at Leo. He was fading. Could he last that long? Could she make the journey to the Red Line and back in time? She had to. The water reclamation plant was a skeleton of rusted pipes and crumbling concrete, deep in the western sector. The air was thick with the smell of stagnant water and chemicals. Ilara arrived with minutes to spare, her rebar clutched tightly, every shadow seeming to hold a threat. Rex was already there, a silhouette against the faint glow of an emergency exit sign. He wasn't alone. 2 other figures, hard-faced and heavily armed, flanked him, Valerius's men. Ilara's stomach plummeted. A trap. He'd led her into a trap. "You came," Rex said, his voice devoid of inflection. He gestured to the other 2. "My associates. We're going the same way." Ilara didn't move. "I thought this was between us." Rex's lips curved into a humorless smile. "Valerius has sanctioned an exploratory mission to the Red Line. Seems our interests align." Temporarily. He saw the suspicion in her eyes. "Don't worry, scavenger, your secret's safe with me, for now. As long as you're useful." One of the men, bulky and scarred, spat on the ground. "Why are we bothering with this stray, Rex?" "She'll slow us down. She knows these lower tunnels better than you do, Harker." Rex replied smoothly. "And she has motivation. Besides, an extra pair of eyes, an extra pair of hands, always useful when Valerius isn't footing the entire bill for risk." The journey to the Red Line was a descent into hell. The tunnels were older here, more dilapidated, the silence more profound, more menacing. The changed were a constant presence, their guttural moans and shuffling gait echoing in the darkness. Rex moved with a deadly efficiency, his 2 associates, Harker and Pike, covering their flanks. Elara, despite her fear and mistrust, had to admit Rex was good. He seemed to anticipate the threats, navigating the treacherous pathways with an almost preternatural sense of direction. He didn't offer comfort, just curt instructions, but he also didn't abandon her when she stumbled, or when a close encounter with a pack of shamblers, his term for a faster, more agile variant of the changed, left her shaken and gasping. He even shared a ration bar, a gesture so unexpected it almost brought tears to her eyes. The medical storage was located in a sub-basement of a mostly collapsed station. The entrance was a reinforced steel door, sealed with a complex electronic lock. Valerius's private little vault. Rex murmured, examining the keypad. He doesn't like sharing. Pike, the quieter of Rex's men, produced a set of sophisticated-looking tools. Give me a few minutes. While Pike worked, Harker grew agitated. This is taking too long. What if a patrol comes by? They won't, Rex said calmly. This area is officially off-limits. Too unstable. Too many variables. He glanced at Elara. Which is why it's perfect for off-the-books acquisitions. The lock clicked open. Rex pushed the heavy door inward, revealing a surprisingly well-lit, climate-controlled room. Shelves lined the walls, stocked with medical supplies, ration packs, weapons, even a few salvaged data pads. It was a treasure trove. Elara's eyes scanned frantically for inhalers. She spotted a box labeled respiratory aids on a high shelf. There. Rex nodded. Grab what you need, quickly. We don't have all night. As Elara reached for the box, Harker suddenly grabbed her arm, his grip like iron. Not so fast. What's in it for us, scavenger? You think you just walk out of here with Valerius's prime stock? Rex stepped forward, his hand casually resting near the pistol holstered at his hip. She's with me, Harker. Part of the deal. What deal? Harker snarled. I don't remember agreeing to share with tunnel rats. The tension in the small room became unbearable. Pike shifted uneasily, his hand moving towards his own weapon. Elara's heart pounded. This was it. The betrayal. Rex had used her to get here, and now his men would dispose of her. But Rex's eyes, cold and hard, were fixed on Harker. My deal. Valerius wants intel on this cache. We provide it. What we choose to overlook in the inventory report is our business. She gets her medicine. We get other things. He subtly indicated a locked strongbox in the corner. Unless you'd rather explain to Valerius why his exploratory team returned empty-handed because of an internal squabble. Harker hesitated, his eyes darting between Rex and the strongbox. Finally, with a growl, he released Elara's arm. Fine, but she takes only what she needs for the kid. Nothing more. Elara scrambled for the box, her hands shaking. She found 2 inhalers, new, sealed. Tears of relief welled in her eyes. She clutched them like an offering. Just as she turned to thank Rex, the lights in the room flickered and died. An alarm, shrill and piercing, blared through the station. Red emergency lights pulsed, casting grotesque shadows. From the corridor outside came the sound of running feet, shouted commands, and something else, the unmistakable, guttural roars of a massive horde of changed. They hadn't just been discovered by Valerius's men. They had company, and the vault had just become a trap. The sudden darkness and blaring alarm threw the vault into chaos. What in the hells? Harker roared, fumbling for his flashlight. Pike was already at the door, peering out. Patrol. And, gods, there's dozens of them, changed, everywhere. Rex grabbed Elara's arm, his voice urgent, cutting through the din. The alarm must have drawn them. We need to move now. He shoved one of the precious inhalers into her hand. Keep this safe. Don't lose it. The corridor outside was a scene of pandemonium. Valerius's guards, clearly alerted by a silent tripwire or sensor, were engaging a massive wave of changed that poured from the deeper tunnels. Pulsefire lit up the passageway in strobing flashes, mingling with the guttural snarls of the infected and the panicked shouts of men. This way. Rex yelled, pulling Elara towards a narrow service hatch at the back of the vault, one she hadn't noticed before. It leads to the old ventilation system. It's a long shot, but it beats that meat grinder. Harker and Pike hesitated, torn between following Rex and trying to fight their way out through the main corridor. Are you insane, Rex? Those shafts could be riddled with them, Harker yelled over the gunfire. Better than being Valerius's bait, Rex retorted, already wrenching the hatch open. He didn't wait for them, just shoved Ilara towards the opening. Go, I'll cover you. Ilara scrambled into the dark, dusty shaft, Rex right behind her. The sounds of the battle faded slightly as he slammed the hatch shut, plunging them into near-total blackness. Flashlight. Rex snapped. Ilara fumbled with hers, the beam weak and erratic. The shaft was tight, barely wide enough for one person, and sloped steeply downwards. They half slid, half crawled, dust and rust showering down on them. Behind them, they could hear muffled thuds against the hatch, either Valerius's men trying to get in, or the Change trying to get out. Where does this go? Ilara gasped, her lungs burning. Hopefully away from them, Rex grunted, pushing her forward. Keep moving. They emerged into a wider but no less treacherous maintenance tunnel. Water dripped from a cracked ceiling, forming stagnant pools on the broken floor. The air was foul, thick with the stench of decay. The distant sounds of the firefight were fainter now, but a new, more immediate threat presented itself. The skittering, clicking sounds of smaller, faster changed, the shamblers Rex had mentioned, echoing from the darkness ahead. They were quicker, more agile than the lumbering brutes, and often hunted in packs. Suddenly, Leo. Ilara had to get back to Leo. Panic threatened to overwhelm her. My brother, she choked out. I need to get back to him. The alcove. Sector G. Rex grabbed her shoulder, steadying her. Sector G is a war zone now, or will be soon if that horde breaks through. We need to find a defensible spot, regroup. He scanned their surroundings, his eyes, accustomed to the dark, picking out details Ilara missed. There. An old transit control room. Up ahead. If the door holds, it might give us a few minutes. They sprinted, the sounds of the shamblers growing closer. Ilara risked a glance back and saw a pair of glowing eyes disappear around a bend, then another. They were being herded. The control room was a small, reinforced bunker, its heavy steel door scarred but intact. Rex slammed it shut, and threw the heavy locking bolts just as the first shambler slammed into it from the other side with a sickening thud. More impacts followed, the door groaning under the assault. Ilara leaned against the wall, gasping for breath, clutching the inhaler. Leo. She had to get the medicine to Leo. They know we're in here, she whispered, her voice trembling. Rex was checking the room, his flashlight beam sweeping across banks of dead equipment. It won't hold them forever. We need another way out. He found it, a rusted floor grate, bolted down. Drainage tunnel. It'll be filthy, but it might lead us clear of this section. They worked frantically to pry the grate open, the sounds of the shamblers scratching and clawing at the door growing louder, more frenzied. One of the bolts snapped, then another. The door was buckling. Just as the grate finally came loose, the main door burst inward with a screech of tearing metal, and the first shambler, gaunt and screeching, launched itself into the room. Rex fired his pistol, the shot deafening in the confined space. The creature fell, but more were pushing through the ruined doorway. Go. Rex yelled, shoving Ilara towards the open grate. Get to your brother, I'll buy you some time. He stood his ground, firing methodically into the oncoming tide of infected. Ilara hesitated, torn. She couldn't just leave him. But Leo, go. Rex roared again, as a shambler slashed at his arm, drawing blood. That was the deal. With a sob, Ilara dropped into the darkness of the drainage tunnel, the sounds of Rex's desperate fight echoing above her. The water was foul, knee-deep, and she stumbled, scraping her hands and knees, but she pushed on, driven by a single, desperate imperative. Leo. She had the medicine. She just had to reach him. The tunnel twisted and turned, a suffocating, lightless maze. She had no idea where she was going, only that she had to keep moving, away from the horror above, towards the faint, flickering hope of her brother's survival. She was alone again, but this time she clutched salvation in her hand. Anna huddled in the shadows of a derelict ticket booth, the comm unit pressed to her ear, crackling with panicked transmissions. Valerius's voice, usually so controlled, was tight with fury. All units, Sector Red Line is compromised. Hostile contact, multiple changed and unauthorized intruders in Sub-Level 4 Medical Street Orage. Seal the sector, no one gets out. Her special assignment with Rex had been a lie, or at least, not the one she'd been told. Rex had split from her and the two other green recruits he'd been assigned almost immediately after entering the Red Line. Muttering something about checking alternate access points. He'd given her a coded instruction. If things go loud, find the old ventilation control, junction 12, wait for my signal. Or don't. Then he'd vanished. Now, things were very loud indeed. The sounds of heavy fighting echoed from deeper in the station. Anna had heard the initial reports of the vault breach, then the mention of a massive changed horde, and Rex was down there, somewhere in the middle of it, and the girl, Ilara. Anna was certain it was the girl from the pharmacy kiosk, the one whose brother needed an inhaler. Rex must have found her, helped her, a dangerous, reckless compassion, or something else entirely. Her orders had been to observe and report, to be Valerius's eyes if Rex tried anything, unsanctioned. But listening to the chaos unfold, knowing Ilara and her brother were somehow entangled in this, Anna felt that familiar knot of dissent tighten in her gut. Valerius wanted the intruders caught, the stolen supplies recovered, and the situation contained, at any cost. He was already ordering lockdown protocols that would trap everyone in the Red Line sector, guards, intruders, and the changed, in a bloodbath. Junction 12, ventilation control. Anna knew this station. As a child, before the sickness, her father, a metro engineer, had sometimes brought her on his weekend rounds. She remembered the dusty diagrams, the maze of tunnels and shafts. Ventilation control at Junction 12 could reroute airflow, open or close specific ducts, or, more drastically, flood sections with emergency fire suppression gas. A desperate measure. But desperate times. She saw a squad of Valerius's elite guard, heavily armed, moving purposefully towards the deeper levels, towards the medical vault. They weren't concerned with rescue. Their orders would be to eliminate all threats, secure the assets. Ilara and Rex, if they were still alive, wouldn't stand a chance. This was it, her moment. Stand by and follow orders, report Rex's probable treachery, and let Valerius's brutal justice run its course, or act. Risk everything for a girl she barely knew, for a man whose motives were still a mystery. She thought of the young man clubbed for water, the woman shot in the back. She thought of Valerius's cold, unwavering certainty. No more. Making her decision, Anna moved. Sticking to the shadows, using her knowledge of the station's layout, she bypassed the main patrol routes, heading for Junction 12. The ventilation control room was small, dusty, and thankfully, deserted. The control panel was old, analog, but the primary system still had power. Diagrams on the wall showed the network of shafts and ducts, including those around sub-level 4. She could see the main access routes, the service tunnels, and the emergency purge system. It was designed to extinguish fires by flooding an area with CO2, lethal if you were caught in it, but it would also drive out or incapacitate anyone in the targeted shafts, changed and human alike. It would create chaos, a diversion, a chance. Her fingers trembled as she traced the lines on the diagram. Targeting the immediate area around the medical vault would be too risky, too many of Valerius's own men. But there were secondary exhaust shafts, leading away from that area, towards the older, less stable parts of the metro. If Ilara and Rex were trying to escape, they might use those. "This is Sentry Miller," she whispered into her comm, using a low-priority channel she hoped wouldn't be immediately flagged. Unidentified hostiles and significant changed concentration moving towards Sector G access tunnels via Red Line auxiliary ventilation, requesting immediate support. It was a gamble. If Valerius diverted forces to Sector G, it might draw some of the pressure off sub-level 4. Then, with a deep breath, she reached for the emergency purge controls for a series of minor ventilation shafts near the periphery of the chaos, but also in the general direction Ilara might flee if she knew the deeper system. She hesitated for only a second. Then she slammed her hand down on the activation lever. Warning sirens, different from the general alarm, began to blare. Red lights flashed on the control panel. On the comm, she heard immediate, confused shouts. "What's that? Fire suppression activated in Sector Red-Violet shafts 7 through 9. Who authorized that?" Valerius's voice cut through, raw with fury. "Find out who did that. I want them found." Anna didn't wait. She ripped the comm unit from her helmet, smashing it on the floor, and slipped out of the control room, disappearing into the labyrinthine tunnels. She had bought them a sliver of time, a fleeting chance. But she had also just signed her own death warrant. The hunt for the traitor would begin immediately. Ilara stumbled out of the drainage pipe into near blackness, choking on the foul air, her clothes soaked with effluent. She was disoriented, bruised, but the inhaler was still clutched tightly in her hand. The sounds of the battle in the Red Line station were distant now, muffled by layers of concrete and earth. She had no idea where she was, only that she was in some deep, forgotten part of the metro. But a faint, almost imperceptible current of air brushed her cheek. An air vent, a way out. She fumbled for her flashlight, its beam now pathetically weak, and cast it around. She was in a narrow collection passage, pipes lining the walls. The air vent was high up, small, but potentially accessible. As she searched for a handhold, a new sound reached her, a hissing, like a giant serpent, accompanied by a strange chemical smell. Then, distant sirens, different from the ones before, more urgent, more localized. Her skin prickled. Something was wrong. The hissing grew louder. She realized with a sickening lurch that the air current had reversed. Air was now being sucked into the vent, and the smell, it was cloying, metallic. She'd smelled something like it once, in an old industrial sector, where warning signs depicted a suffocating cloud. Gas. Panic, cold and absolute, seized her. Anna. It had to be Anna's doing. A diversion. But it was flooding these lower tunnels. She had to get out, get higher. She scrambled desperately, finding purchase on a loose pipe, hauling herself upwards. The vent grate was rusted shut. She hammered at it with the butt of her flashlight, the weak metal denting, then tearing. She squeezed through just as the gas, now visible as a faint, shimmering haze, began to fill the passage below. She found herself in another ventilation shaft, cleaner this time, angled upwards. She could hear the distant cacophony from the Red Line station, but also, closer, the shouts and running footsteps of Valerius's men. The gas purge had thrown them into disarray, creating pockets of chaos. And in that chaos, perhaps an opportunity. She had to get to Leo. The thought was a burning coal in her chest. She followed the shaft, guided by instinct and a desperate hope, ignoring the burning in her lungs and the scream of her overtaxed muscles. It opened into a larger maintenance corridor, one she vaguely recognized. She was closer. Then, she saw him, Valerius. Not in person, but his voice, amplified, booming from a loudspeaker somewhere nearby. The traitor will be found. They will be made an example of. All units, lockdown protocols are in effect. No one leaves this sector. Shoot to kill any unauthorized individuals. His voice was laced with a cold fury that made Ilara's blood run colder than the gas. She pressed herself into a shadowy alcove as a heavily armed patrol rushed past, their faces grim, their weapons ready. The diversion Anna had created was also a trap, sealing this section of the metro. Ilara waited until they passed, then darted across the corridor, heading towards the known routes to Sector G. She moved like a ghost, fear lending wings to her feet. She found the passage leading to their alcove. It was quiet, too quiet. Her heart hammered. She slid the door open. Leo lay on the pallet, still, too still. Leo. She rushed to his side, her fingers fumbling for his wrist. A pulse, faint, thready, but there. His breathing was a shallow, barely perceptible whisper. She tore open the packaging of the inhaler, her hands shaking violently. Leo, wake up. I have it. I have the medicine. She gently lifted his head, placed the inhaler to his lips, and pressed the canister. Once, twice. He didn't respond. Tears streamed down Ilara's face. No, please, Leo, no. Then, a flicker of his eyelids, a tiny, shuddering gasp, followed by another, slightly stronger. Color, faint but definite, began to return to his lips. He coughed, a weak, sputtering sound, but then his breathing eased, the terrible wheezing subsiding into a more regular, albeit still shallow, rhythm. Ilara sagged, relief so profound it left her weak, sobbing openly. He was alive. She had made it. Just then, the door to the alcove creaked open. Ilara whirled, rebar at the ready, expecting Valerius's men. But it was Rex. He was battered, bleeding from a nasty gash on his arm, his clothes torn, but alive. He leaned against the doorframe, exhausted. "Looks like you made it," he said, his voice raspy. "Both of you." "Rex, how?" "The gas purge bought me an exit," he said, a grim smile touching his lips. Turns out Valerius isn't the only one with surprises. Your friend, Anna, she's either very brave or very foolish. He looked at Leo. He going to be okay? I think so, Ilara whispered, still stroking Leo's hair. Thanks to you, and her. Rex pushed himself upright. We can't stay here. Valerius will have this whole sector turned upside down looking for me, for you, and for the girl who flushed his system. They know about this alcove. He offered Ilara a hand. I know a way. Out, or at least deeper in, away from Valerius. Ilara looked at Leo, then at Rex. Trust was still a fragile thing. But he had helped her. He had fought for her. Where? Rex's smile was gone, replaced by a grim resolve. There are always other tunnels, older ones, forgotten ones. Valerius doesn't own all the darkness down here. He paused. But it won't be easy, and what's on the other side? If there even is an other side, who knows? The choice was stark. Stay and face Valerius's wrath, or venture into the unknown, deeper into the catacombs, with a man she barely knew, carrying her recovering brother. There was no real choice at all. Ilara nodded, taking his hand. Let's go. Together, the three of them, the desperate sister, the recovering child, and the cynical survivor, slipped out of the alcove, leaving behind the brief sanctuary that had almost become a tomb, and vanished into the echoing, oppressive darkness of the metro's unplumbed depths. The distant shouts of Valerius's patrols faded behind them, replaced by the drip of water, the skitter of unseen things, and the uncertain promise of a future purchased at an almost unbearable cost. The exit, if it existed, was still a long way off, shrouded in shadows and the ever-present threat of the changed, but for the first time in a long time, Ilara felt a flicker, not of hope, but of grim, unyielding determination. They would survive. They had to.